When we were asked to do this presentation, we said we can teach you everything you need to know about railroads in about an hour and a half. So they adjusted the schedule and let us come in early in the morning. So, all right, still got a sense of humor, right? The second day of the conference. So, all right, we're going to give you. Robert and I are going to split this presentation in two halves. I'm going to give you the 10,000-foot level, kind of show you how we fit in the TxDOT family. Robert's going to drill into our new manual, which is going to talk about the procedures which we in the division work with the districts. So some ground rules. We need to talk about how we fit. A lot of people, it's the best kept secret, the rail safety section. A lot of people don't know we exist. Everybody always talks about the rail division. And we were part of that family. And we were part of that family in 2013, December. We were split off and brought into traffic operations. And so the three core groups I'm going to talk about were all part of rail division, but now they're brought into the traffic operations. And it's a better fit. We're an engineering group. We're also a safety group. The rail division is more of a planning and operating of an active railroad, Texas Pacifico. Also, Texas leads the country. We have a little over 10,500 miles of mainline track. No other state is the same size as us. The next one is Illinois, and then California's. We're double of California. We have identified 61 operating railroads in the state of Texas. That doesn't mean there's actually more, because some of the industries that are not connected to the general railroad system have their own switching and power, and they do their own facility movements. But we have identified 61 throughout the state of Texas, and so we're going to kind of show you how that fits into how our group works. I may not have mashed the right button. There we go. So our agenda, we're going to talk about the rail safety section. I'm also going to talk about a railroad crossing had significant impact the way we do business, not just our section, but the state of Texas and the other DOTs across the country. Robert's going to talk about the manual, and then we're going to save a little bit at the end for questions and answers. So a little bit about our group. We have three distinct functions, and we deal with three distinct federal agencies. One group, Rural Highways, deals with FHWA. This is the group that's responsible for doing the road crossings, active warning devices, the federal signal programs, the replanking projects. When you have a construction project that has a railroad right-of-way within the limits of your project, this group does the agreements, does your right of entry, does your flagging. So basically, this group is a very supportive role to the districts. In the district, you have a railroad coordinator. That person is very important because in the field level, they don't report to the division, they report to the district, but they will coordinate your rail activities with us so that we can stay ahead of the game, because the last thing you want is something to defer your letting process. When you go to contract, you want that thing to go smoothly. Well, a lot of contracts take a long time to process. Robert's going to talk about this in more detail, but I just kind of give you a little framework here. The second group is what we refer to as the rail safety inspections. This is a group of 15 railroad investigators that have a regulatory function that goes out and regulates the operating railroads in Texas. This group is certified by the federal government to enforce federal law, and they work with all the railroads in Texas. All 5 disciplines are covered in this group. The next function of our group is transit. Who in this room is familiar with like a light rail system? Like DART, Houston. Well, this group here deals with state safety oversight, so make sure that operation runs as safe as it can as well. So across the group, if it's on rail, safety application, engineering application, it's in our group. Now, a game changer. This crossing could look like any crossing throughout the state of Texas. How many roadways within your district or your territory that you know a parallel railroad track? And then to make it even more complicated, let's talk about a T intersection, not a four-way intersection, but a T intersection that's signalized, and you have a double track mainline track. So we're kind of making the simplicity of what's going on here into a more reality of a statement. So this crossing had significant impacts on the way we as a DOT operate. Does this picture ring a bell for anyone in the group? Okay, well, next slide. 20 years ago this month, there was a horrific crash that occurred between a moving passenger train and a school bus which was fouled in the tracks. 7 children on the bus were killed. The bus driver and 24 students were sent to the hospital. Now, there was a lot of contributing factors to this event. There's not one single thing that occurred that made this event happen. You had, we do the what ifs, we do, when we do the risk analysis, we say, what if this, what if this? Well, this event had it. Had a road construction, signal upgrades, railroad upgrades, a school bus operator who did not know her route. She was being led by the children on the bus. The thing we say a lot in Operation Lifesaver, respect the train, any track, anytime. There's no, like on our roadway, we have the right one way and the left the other. On a railroad track, you can have a train move in any direction, anytime. So what did we learn from this event? Well, from the NTSB report that came out, they identified 29 issues from this event that was a contributing factor. Some of those events were the design of the roadway. And on the design projects, when you have a paralleling track within the right-of-way of the road, you can really only expand one way, can't you? I mean, you're really limited on one side. But what if you're coming through a compressed area like a downtown, or you have businesses? Just what I'm saying is designs get real complicated fast. The simpler projects have been done. The projects we're dealing with now, more and more complicated. Railroad highway signal interaction. I'm going to use the word preemption. Does that ring a bell? Anybody seen the preemption form? Anybody done a preemption calculation? Anybody know what preemption means? Okay, just what it means. It means something's going to happen before, for example, if the train is approaching and your advanced circuitry is working correctly, your clearing cycle is going to clear out the intersection to allow the intersection to be ready to receive the train through the crossing. What's the minimum warning time from an active warning device? Not preemption, but the minimum warning time that the railroad has to give us to clear the intersection. Anybody know? All right, we need to add another 10 minutes to our presentation. Just kidding. The workshop will be after, but 20-ish seconds is the minimum. But is that enough time? Well, there's a lot of studies out there saying the longer you give your the moving public, the more that it's likely they're going to go around your down gates or through the intersection. One of the things that they also identified is communications. How many of y'all in your projects have to deal with the railroad? I know the Fort Worth district does. Is that a simple process? No. Well, our group can come in. It's kind of like you're going to, I said to one of the presentations yesterday, and we were talking about prepping for a trial. Well, we're kind of your attorney, per se. We'll come in and help you process that agreement to make sure we can streamline it, because things we do on a normal day-to-day basis, you may not be familiar with. And we can help with that. But the time of processing is pretty set. Your benefit to us is get us early in the process. Robert's going to cover the responsibilities and how we can help on that. But the coordination between the DOT, the Illinois DOT, and the Union Pacific Railroad was identified as a problem. And then look at the last part of that. It says their oversight of the signaling system integration. Last word, integration. Meaning the railroad has their control system on their tracks. They're in the business of moving trains. We're in the business of controlling flow on our roadways. Two separate systems, and we have to connect them. And that's where that preemption is very important. It was a contributing factor in this event. Now, who knows the 3 E's? Education, or engineering, education, and enforcement. Let me show you some stats that we're looking at, which are pretty scary. But between 2010, 2014, we queried all the accidents that occurred in the FRA database, and 68% of them occurred where the active warning device had a gated crossing. And as a side note, throughout the state of Texas, 60% of the crossings are gated. So is this an educational issue? People driving around through, I mean, big problem. I see trends are going up. 57% of the crossing collisions occurred where the crossing was within 200 feet of a railroad track. So what is that saying? Over half are occurring where there's a potential preemption issue. And then the last one, 60% of the vehicles in the crash were moving at the time of collision. Driving around the gates, trying to beat the train. Just those numbers are alarming. So the 3E principles, we need to start talking more, and we have some reach out to Operation Lifesaver. The rest of it, the vehicle, we've seen kind of a, there's really no difference in the car, the pickup, tractor trailer, and believe it or not, pedestrians have issues at the railroad crossing as well. So I'm gonna turn it over to Robert. Robert's gonna, that was 10,000 foot. Robert's gonna drill you into our manual and procedures. So if you have any questions, we can talk more. Grab us after the presentation, or if we have time, we'll answer any question you have. Thanks, Robert.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Those of you in the back, just want to make sure you can hear us up here. I see heads nodding, coming up from their cell phones. Also, to remind everyone, my understanding is all of these PowerPoint presentations are going to be made available on the conference website at the end. Like Luke said, he's the section manager, I'm the branch manager. I get to deal with all the rail highway crossings. A little bit more statistics. Luke told you we have a little over 11,000 rail miles within the state of Texas. We also have approximately 15,000 railroad crossings. The beginning of the presentation by John, we heard a train approaching one of those crossings nearby. Of the 15,000, approximately 9,000 are public at grade, and then of that 9,000, as Luke indicated, about 6,000 are gated or have other train-activated warning devices. The other 3,000 are passive, where they just have the signs. One of the things we've been doing within rail section, like Luke alluded to, we were moved. Literally 1 week to the day after I started, after I moved my family from Arizona, got that lovely email from Phil Wilson saying, oh, by the way, we're splitting up rail division. So it kind of gave us an opportunity. We got moved back into traffic operations division with our new division manager. She kind of gave us, hey, look at everything. Let's look at everything. Let's update it. Let's get everything cleaned up, modernized, simplified, whatever we can do. So our biggest accomplishment, and it was an audit requirement, so there was a lot of emphasis, is replacement of the 1998 rail operations policy volume with what is now the 2015 Rail Highways Operation Manual. This is not policy, this is a guideline. We have posted this under the TxDOT online manual site, which is the web link that is here, and we have also posted it on our traffic operations internet website as well. Some of the highlights. I'm not going to dive down into the 200 pages of the manual. But again, what we did was we modernized, and we also consolidated a whole bunch of other guidelines into this one manual. So again, like was occurring in the 1998 version, what are some best practices? You have an overpass, you have an underpass, you're looking at adding or widening an at-grade crossing. We do talk about preemption. We talk about the interaction between the district and the railroad, the district and the divisions, both in the planning, in the design, and in the construction and the maintenance phase. We also clearly state who is responsible for what. Ultimately, if there is going to be a signed agreement with the railroad to allow construction or maintenance at a crossing, normally that agreement is handled through my office. I'm the one that gets to sign on it. The one exception, and we do talk about it in here, is the last item, railroad-initiated projects. And in that case, the district would be responsible for doing the donation agreement between the railroad and the state. Other things we go over is also the different programs that we operate through the rail highway section. Luke mentioned earlier, I have approximately a $20 million budget. 18 of it is for federal highway funded federal safety projects, what we call FSP, also known nationally as Section 130 after 23 CFR 130. This is where both on-system and off-system, if it's a public road crossing, we can initiate the project with district support, and if it's off-system, with the local agency support and concurrence, installing lights and gates, or updating the signage, or doing preemption. The other programs that we manage, the one is our replanking or our resurfacing program. And again, that's where we go to the railroads and we partner with them if it's an on-system road at grade to replace the physical crossing panels. There's a third program, what's called a signal maintenance fund, which is wholly maintained through my office. And that's where by state administrative code, we basically offer a maintenance payment to each of the railroads for however many railroad signals they have on system. Some other things we've done. Like I said, we've consolidated, we're trying to modernize, we're trying to update. One of the things that we found was Bridge Division, their website would have standard sheets dealing with railroads. That was way back in the day when all the rail coordination was through the Bridge Division. Design section would have railroad-specific sheets. Again, that was because their design section at one time we were there. We had stuff under the Rail Division website. We had stuff under the Traffic Division website. So for those of you who are TxDOT employees, you know about Crossroads. Under the Traffic Operations Division, we have a rail safety section, we have a rail highway section, and that's where we're starting to consolidate all of this material. For those within TxDOT, this means all the memos we send out, current contact lists for all the railroads, examples of agreements, all the different types of agreements that we do. We're trying to get all this stuff in a common location. Now, for our partners outside of TxDOT, we've done the same thing on the TxDOT.gov website under Traffic Operations section. We've put in, here's examples of Exhibit A's, submittals that go to the railroads, guidelines. These are basically how you design certain types of structures, bridges going over railroads, bridges going under railroads, that we, the state of Texas, and the railroads have negotiated and agreed to. And these are living documents. We're always changing stuff as we find out some new information or as we update information. As was mentioned earlier, what Luke said is one of the things as traffic engineers, as traffic operators, we need to be aware of is there are always going to be changes in interactions with the rail industry. One big one that happened, in fact it went live September 1 of this year, is the national law dealing with emergency notification signs.
Here's what I found on the web for things as traffic engineers, as traffic.
As my little clock starts talking to me. Thank you. We're all probably familiar at the railroad crossing with the R15-4 sign. This sign, it was codified in transportation code and it was basically called the grade crossing malfunction hotline. If someone was to notice there was a problem at a railroad crossing, the signals were malfunctioning, whatever, the phone number there went to a dedicated line at the DPS, and you also had this crossing number. That service is no longer in effect. Starting September 1, a national law now requires what's called the I-13 sign. This is in the MUTCD. And the big change here is the sign color, the sign appearance, but the other thing is this thing right here. Each individual railroad will have their own phone number there. So instead of someone calling DPS, someone's going to be calling directly to the railroad. We still have our crossing number, But again, the key difference is a person's going to be calling the railroad. What we as traffic engineers and traffic operators need to know is, and this is what you're going to see, we're changing our standard sheets. We're no longer calling for the R15-4, we're calling for the I-13, and we're making sure those signs are up. But again, this was like Fox River Grove kind of changed how we do the whole traffic signal interconnection. A railroad crossing collision in 2008 between a Union Pacific train and a Metroliner completely changed the entire way how we interact with the railroads, emergency notification, stuff like that. Some other changes I forgot to bring up on the last slide on Crossroads and on our TxDOT site. We are still reviewing and updating our sheets. As I mentioned briefly, all of our standard sheets dealing with railroads, we're in the process of redoing those, bringing them up to the current MUTCD standard, and we're also trying to give, again, you all as the traffic engineers, as the designers, some information on some common situations we've been seeing. How do you do the signage? How do you do the striping? Things like that. Finally, the other change that we have coming, keep your ears open, the preemption forms. We have asked TTI to revisit them and to simplify them, so those are going to be updated probably within the next 6 months or so. Finally, one thing I would like to ask you all to do is when you do have railroad crossings within your districts. I mentioned earlier we have our Federal Railroad Safety Program. One of the things that I love to do are these. To me, this is the best railroad crossing. This crossing was closed, and as part of the city agreeing to this, we were able to reimburse them about $150,000 that they used for some other projects within the city of Orange. In addition, the railroad, I believe, contributed $50,000 as an outright donation to the city. So, like Luke said earlier, if you're getting complaints, if you're getting calls, concerns about railroad crossings, let's try to be a little proactive. Do we have too many, are there too many railroad crossings? Is there an opportunity for us to consolidate these and close some of the crossings? So with that, that was our presentation, and would like to see if anyone had any questions. Yes, sir.
Kind of curious, have you looked into any means to reduce gate violators? Any kinds of technologies, maybe automated enforcement of gate violators as well?
The question is on the railroad gates, since we have so many drive-arounds, have we looked at technology or other methods to reduce that? One of the things, I know Cap Metro, I believe DART and the TRE, they put in what are called quad gates. Gates on all four quadrants of the crossing. The one that I personally prefer is medians. Preferably a non-traversable concrete median, at least 100 feet long, at least 4 feet wide. There are some other, what I would say more retrofit curbs with flexible delineators. Those have been used as well. As for the photo enforcement, there's been some trials with them, but I believe the results have been mixed. And with the current with the current legislative climate about red light cameras, I don't know how viable of an option that's going to be. But the other one is, and this is one thing a lot of the railroads will do, is they will go in and partner with the law enforcement community, and they will do targeted enforcement programs. Yes, sir.
How much involvement do you have with quiet zones?
Quiet zones. Again, in our manual, we have a section devoted to quiet zones. Technically, what a quiet zone means is the railroad train is not required to sound the horn when it approaches an at-grade crossing. The key difference I need to stress to everyone, and I always stress to everyone, is They're not required, but they always have the right and they have the duty to sound it if they see an unsafe condition. So quiet zones, if we will get notices on all quiet zones within the state. One of the reasons is one of the operations that my staff handles is we do the rail crossing inventory. So part of our job, we're aware of a quiet zone, we make sure the inventory is correct. If let's say the city is proposing a quiet zone, they will come to us and say, here's the updated crossing information, vehicle counts, whatever. We're the ones that can update that to the federal database. At the same time, we make sure if it is an on-system road that is within the quiet zone, we make sure that the local district is aware so that if there's any modifications, like let's say they have to put in medians, they have to do additional signage, whatever, the district is aware and is getting it permitted. Yes, Adam?
When in the project development phase does the district, when should they contact you about a railroad agreement? Typically, how long does it take for an agreement to get put in place?
Okay, so the question is, we have a railroad project, when should the district be approaching Rail Highway Division? As Luke mentioned, we would say earlier is better. As long as the district is talking to the railroad, that is the key factor. Generally, and again, we go over it in our manual, the railroad may require a preliminary engineering agreement. They're going to be charging the state for their time. We will legally get involved at that point because we'll write the agreement. If we have a complex crossing, and I'm going to use the one that the general mentioned yesterday, we're going to be grade separating the George Bush intersection with the railroad track right over here. We're talking massive amount of work. We're trying to get the comments to the railroad, and what we're trying to do is get a concept plan. In the past, everyone gave us an Exhibit A. What we're asking now, give us a simple plan and profile, give us a simple, before you've even started developing your plans. And that's kind of when we ask. And especially if you're talking traffic signal preemption, if you're talking underpasses, if you're talking a new bridge, or if you're talking widening of a road, we really need that contact with the railroad early on. That will also allow us to track the project and make sure it's cleared on time.